Hi. Before going to video, please subscribe to my channel for more interesting stuff.
Story from r/creepyencounters. Posted by you/therego. My best friend murdered her mother. First of all, English is my third language, so don't mind the writing skills. We met when we entered elementary school, and we quickly became friends. I'm going to tell you this fast because I don't think you are interested in the details. She was always weird, but what am I going to object if I am too? She had never given me any reason to think that she would do something like that, and although I don't mean to defend her, her mother was an abusive woman and an abusive mother. I had a past with psychological problems, and the mother, seeing that her daughter was just as ill as me, came looking for me and found me on the street. She yelled at me to get away from her daughter, that I caused her all the problems in her family. He threatened to report me if I approached my friend, and he left. Don't judge me, I was a scared girl, and I let her manipulate me as she kept hitting and yelling at her daughter every day. And meanwhile, I kept away. A couple of years later we recovered contact. We were already teenagers. We returned to the beautiful friendship we had before, and we were very close. She told me that they were doing family therapy and that her mother treated her better. I was very happy for her. Time passed, and one day, the fateful day, she appeared late in class, with her hair dyed black. She was blonde, and smiled when I told her that I had not recognized her. That day I did not accompany her home because she had things to do. I woke up the next morning with my mother calling me, almost screaming. In the news, a photo of the door of her apartment, with the phrase "mother murdered in my city." Now, almost 2 years later, she is in a psychological center, and I receive a letter from time to time. And no, I don't reply to any of them. Story from r/creepyencounters. Posted by you/the Paramedic story time. Aftermath of murder. If anyone hasn't seen one of the other stories I've posted on here, I'll give the same background. I am, and have been, a paramedic for about 10 years. My entire career has been spent in emergency medicine, responding to 911 calls and providing advanced life support for life-threatening illnesses and injuries. The calls we respond to range from inappropriate use of an ambulance, to minutes away from death, and oftentimes, it's already too late. If you have read my other stories here, then you know the background. But in 2014 I moved to another city a couple hours away from home to work. The city was smallish, less than 100k people, but the ambulance serviced the entire county where the city resides. At that time there was a significant oil boom in the area, so thousands of people flooded the city and county to work in the oil fields nearby. This caused the city to get a little rougher, as you had people from all over the country moving there to work, and that many people in a small place increased the cost of living. And we saw a large increase in violent crimes as well as traumatic injuries. We worked 24-hour shifts, which weren't too bad. The days were usually somewhat busy, and at night the ambulance station had rooms with twin beds that allowed you to get some fairly decent sleep at night. Most of the calls that would classify as crazy, creepy, or scary always tend to come at night. The day that this story takes place was a little different than normal. Normally I get an EMT basic partner, which means, since I am the advanced provider on the truck, I get all of the patients. But, today I had another paramedic partner, because we were training in a new hire paramedic. It was her first day in wTwo, field training orientation. This means we generally let her take the calls, and sit back and evaluate her performance to ensure she is capable and doesn't kill anyone. This was her first job after graduation, so she was still pretty green. I could see she was very nervous and trying very hard to do her best. So, as per usual, the day was pretty busy, but as it began to wind down, I was getting ready to attempt to take a nap. I kick off my boots and lay down on the bed, on top of the covers, easier to get up and going that way if a call comes in. I put my radio up by my head, full volume like always, so I can be sure to wake up if we get a call. Sure enough, midnight starts to roll around and I hear a call go out. Dispatch says, "Man who has been stabbed, is not breathing." Luckily it's not my call, and another ambulance responds, so I go back to bed. Or try to. About 30 minutes later, another call goes out, and this time it is for me. Dispatch information: man with a knife wound on his hands, police are on scene. I get my boots on, wake up the new girl and my partner, and walk out to the ambulance. The area of the call was right smack dab in the middle of downtown. We responded non-emergent, as it was not a life-threatening injury. As we arrive on scene, there is probably around 6 police cars on scene, all with their lights on. The area itself was through an alleyway and behind a building just off the main street. As we pull up, there are a number of officers, a couple sheriff deputies, and a detective, all standing around this man with a rag on his hand. As I got closer, I could see the man was bald, middle-aged and had almost a homeless look to him. He also had a big dark spot in the middle of his forehead. One of the officers approached me to fill me in on what's going on before I talk to the guy and start to treat him. The officer tells me, the man has a large laceration on the back of his hand that he received from a knife. At this point, I was still a bit groggy and didn't put two and two together. The officer says the man said he was attacked by another man, and that he is probably going to need stitches. So as it is not serious, I have my wTwo approach first to begin her assessment and give me her treatment plan. I stay close behind her and we both walk up to the man who is in handcuffs. As we approach, the dark spot on the guy's forehead is now clear. On the center of his forehead, stretching from his eyebrows and what would have been his hairline, is the biggest swastika tattoo I have ever seen. My wTwo begins to talk to the man, as I stand back and observe. Something about that man's general composure and responses chilled me. When we first walked up, the man was muttering something underneath his breath. I couldn't tell what he was saying, but he was repeating it over and over. My wTwo asked police to uncuff him to see the cut on his hand more clearly. At this point, one of the other officers produced the knife he believes to be the weapon that caused the injury. The knife was in an evidence baggie, and it was covered in blood. It was nothing special, it just looked like a cheap plastic pocket knife, like you would buy at some cheesy gift shop. It was a folding knife with a black plastic handle, and a blade that was maybe 3 inches long, with a bit of serration towards the handle. The man showed us his hand. On the back, cutting right through another large swastika tattoo, was a laceration that went from the base of his pinky finger to the lower fleshy part of the thumb. It was quite wide also, approximately 3 centimeters, exposing the bones of his metacarpals, as well as tendons. The bleeding had mostly stopped with pressure from the towel he was holding on to. When my partner asked the man what had happened, the man then repeated to us what he had been repeatedly muttering to himself: "I killed him, man. He's dead, man. I had to have killed him. He's gotta be dead." At this point, I'm starting to put it together and understanding the larger picture. We get the man into the ambulance so we can assess for any other injuries that may not be visible under his clothing. After a thorough search, we realize there are no other injuries, so we begin to transport him to the hospital. My wTwo bandaged the man's hand, and as we are driving I start to ask questions to try and figure out the details. The man told me everything I wanted to know, and never lost that chilling vibe, staring distantly as he recounted what happened. The man told me that he is homeless and was wandering around when a friend offered him a ride. He says that he was leery of the man, but decided to get in anyway and accept the offer. The man said the friend began asking him if he hated Angers. The man said he didn't and that he wasn't racist. He tells me this is when his friend became upset with him and tried to stab him with a pocket knife. The man said he attempted to defend himself, managed to wrestle the knife away from his friend and stabbed him back before jumping out of the car and running. So with this shocking telling of the tale, we continue to transport the man in silence. Also, as a side note, an officer rode in the ambulance with us the whole way. After we dropped the man off at the ER, we all kind of sat there shocked leaving the hospital. We returned to the station and tried to get some sleep, however we were not destined for sleep this night. An hour later, we get another call for a body removal, from downtown, less than 3 blocks away from our last call. We pull up to the area, which is the middle of the street. The street itself is blocked off 100 feet on both sides by a fire truck and police cars. The fire truck was equipped with a double stack of 4 halogen lights, risen up on the ladder shining down to illuminate the area. Walking up with the stretcher and body bag, the detective on scene tells us they are done with the investigation and they are ready for us to take the body to the medical examiner's office. At this point we are still about 50 feet away from where the body lay. From where we are I can see the person lying in the middle of the street. We get closer and take a few minutes to examine the body. What I see, and putting together what I was told, is astonishing to say the least. The man, another middle-aged man, appears white, possibly Mexican, lays in the middle of the street on his back, with his arms spread eagle, and his legs straight. There is a vehicle parked on the side of the road, with its driver door still open. I figured that must be this guy's vehicle. It was parked neatly, not haphazardly, or incorrectly. The deceased man has streaks of blood coming from his nose and mouth, with several small puncture wounds on his face and cheeks. Looking at his torso, there are about a dozen more knife-shaped puncture wounds in his chest and abdomen. Most of the wounds were so jagged and barbaric looking, you could see adipose tissue, fat, pushing out of them. There wasn't much of a blood puddle under the man, but a very large trail of blood ran from the man to the side of the street where the curb is. The blood then continues its flow another 10 feet along the curb before spilling into a storm drain. With that much blood the man was exsanguinated. and bled out there in the middle of the street. We packaged the man into the body bag, and transported him to the ME's office. When we got back to the station, my charge medic told me the officer that rode with the first patient requested that we fill out a report on what we heard the man say. Thankfully the rest of the shift was uneventful. Fast forward to a couple years ago, I received a call from the state's attorney. He asked if I remembered the call, to which I informed him I do. He told me that this person is going to trial for murder, is pleading not guilty, and he would like to go over my statement with me as I would be a key witness and require my testimony in court. We went over my statement and we talked about it a bit. Then, he told me he would be in touch, and wished me a good day. A few days later, he calls me up again, and informs me that the man changed his plea to self-defense and that I was needed in court in a week. Literally one day before the trial, he calls me up again. He tells me this time the man changed his plea to guilty, and I was no longer needed. I don't know what happened after that. I never really looked into it. It's just another brick in the wall, so to speak, a story filed away in my brain, probably never to be forgotten. Thanks for reading. I hope you enjoyed. I got plenty more stories if you'd like to hear them. Let me know. Story from r/creepyencounters. Posted by u/Ariamari. What would you do if someone tried opening your front door at 3 a.m.? Back in 2018 I had a bad fever, the kind of fever that you'll wake up in the middle of the night freezing your ass off and the next sweating. Anyways, fast forwarding, my room is closest to my front door. It was 3 a.m. and I was awake cause I couldn't sleep, and all of a sudden I hear someone semi-aggressively trying to open my front door. I live with my parents, so I thought it was my brother coming home, so I called his name. The door continued to try and open. To answer my question I hid in my bed terrified. Then a few minutes later I told my dad and he could see the door had been mangled with. That day he installed cameras, and no lie, about a month later we caught a man on camera trying to open the basement door this time. I really regret not looking out my window to try and spot this man, but I was so terrified. It also freaks me out that if that night someone left the door unlocked, a stranger would have been lurking inside my house. Edit. So I was 18 when this happened, and growing up my parents were always super strict with me. So I used to sneak out of my house all the time and leave my front door unlocked so that my parents wouldn't hear me when I came home. I had the kind of lock that was a keypad so you could hear when open/locked. Just let that sink in. On how lucky I was to either be sick, or to have locked the door that night. Story from r/creepyencounters. Posted by u/miss_match_. 2 lucky escapes in one day. Okay, so I walked to the store because it was a nice day and with quarantine, I could use some fresh air, sun and exercise. On my way there, 2 dudes on dirt bikes with black bodysuits and helmets came my way. As they passed I could hear one scream, "Get her bag." My headphones weren't playing music, thank God. As I turned around, sure enough, one was driving back in my direction. I spreaded my legs to stand my ground and my bag was now away from the street. He stopped halfway and looked at me for what seemed like forever before changing his mind and driving away. Getting to the store safely, I do my shopping and leave. On that same street I see an old man on his bike now. He was just standing there looking at me. I was still far away at that point. After 2 minutes I was now much closer and I could see the creepy, predatory look in his eyes. Mind you, he never once looked away and there was nothing and nobody behind me to look at. Of course I stared back and made it clear with my expression that I knew he was up to something. I crossed the street to walk on the side where the houses were. He was standing between a closed big gardening store and an open field, conveniently near the dumpsters. As I passed him, I kept staring back and getting ready to run to a house and knock on the door or fight for my life if nobody was home. He didn't move, thank God. After I passed him, I made sure to turn around every couple of seconds to scan his position. He was still staring at me. When I got to the end of the road, ready to turn left or right, he started biking in my direction. I needed to cross the street to his side, so I made it a point to stop until he passed me. He also stopped and signaled me to cross the street, because he wasn't really going anywhere, he just wanted to know where I was going. Luckily for me, 2 people also out on a walk headed in my direction and I screamed, "I know what you're doing, it's so obvious, leave me alone." He looked shocked and didn't know what to do for a second. He just looked bewildered, stared at the ground and behind him before biking away. I was in shock and very happy I didn't panic. I never walked home so fast with all my groceries. I'm never leaving the house like this again. I live in a quiet town where nothing ever seems to happen, but I guess the criminals and rapists are having a though time too. They now have to take bigger risks, commit crimes closer to their homes, I guess. Story from r/creepyencounters. Posted BU/SoryMVRI. An encounter I had when I was 10. I met this kid who was about 3 to 4 years older than me on the bus, let's call him Alex, and our friendship started out pretty innocent. We'd mostly talk about games. One day he started talking about his cousin that used to own a pawn shop, and now it's closing, so if I want he can give me some of the games they have doubles of. This was in the time of N64, so there were cartridges. Time passed and he became increasingly strange, asking me what type of things I would give up for these games, and joking that he would sell me drugs. I was young and naive, so this kind of made me uncomfortable. Still, I was forced to see him every day after school as he lives 2 houses down from me. One day while he was at my house, he took one of my eyelashes and told me if I blew it away I could make any wish I want and it would come true. He showed me with his eyelash, then asked me to do it too. I did. The next day he was visibly shaken up and sweaty, and he starts telling me we messed with forces we shouldn't have and that I have been cursed, and that I now have a lump of poison in my throat that will release if I tell anyone about it. He called it black magic and told me his grandfather had taught him. This was all making me extremely anxious. I already had problems with early OCD and obsessive thoughts. He then explained that my parents would die unless I give him one of my specific items, an N64 cartridge. I did it without thinking about it. He also borrowed my bike once to go to the store, and he got a very strong mint spray and told me I had to drink it and then kiss my mom and get some into her mouth or she will die. I also did this. He kept asking for more things and increasing the consequences. He once scraped a sharp knife across my wrist in my kitchen, then explained if it had caught on a piece of skin and bled it would have meant something was wrong. I cried a lot while he would explain these things, and the amount of emotion he displayed made it seem like more than simple bullying to get some games. I have always wondered if he was truly insane and manipulative or if there was anything supernatural at work. It continues to affect me 20 years later, as I'm innately superstitious and diagnosed OCD. Eventually I started avoiding him on the bus, and even went as far as hiding in a dresser without drawers within view of the window by the door so I could see if he came up the door. Then for years after this, any time I would leave the house I would fear him seeing me. It honestly turned me into more of an introvert than I had ever been, and I pulled away from a lot of family like my brother who couldn't understand why I didn't want to walk to the store with him anymore. Eventually he moved away, and the one comfort I had was one of my friends from school and his brother had an experience with Alex where he broke a window of theirs and they confirmed he was insane. It comforted me to believe none of it is real, but I still hope I never meet this guy again. I don't know if I would punch him or have a panic attack. Story from r/creepyencounters. Posted by u/shrewd_wide. Met a dangerous guy at a gas station. This was back in 2014. I was with a boyfriend at a gas station in my hometown when I saw a grown man in a Pikachu hat, Pikachu shirt, and carrying around a tiny Pikachu doll. I thought, that's funny, I'm going to get a picture with him. I approach him and ask if I can have a picture with him. He doesn't speak but waves me over to his car where he retrieved a notebook and writes, "You shouldn't talk to strangers. Be careful." I read it and nod. He writes, "Be careful." Still. To me this meant that he was dangerous and he knew it. He wanted me to know it too. I nodded again. My boyfriend took the picture and everyone went their separate ways. I was a bit shaken at his scribble. I chalked it off to a weird encounter and that was it. A month later, the news said a local man was arrested for jumping the White House fence. He was 26 years old. This is significant in our country because this means he is no longer on his parents' health insurance. Apparently, he was attempting to speak to the president about healthcare as he had been mentally ill and suffering. His Pikachu was his best friend according to his mother. The local police had warned the FBI about him. But I got a cool picture.
Thanks for watching. Please do like, share, comment and subscribe for more videos.